L. Blackburn, and then my password. It's okay.
Just click on her user. She's the one who set the
Oh, she's telling her to do the same thing. Yeah, just so everyone knows, when I got out of college, not only was there not cell phones, we had one coin phone in the entire hallway for our entire dorm. So, not quite.
I haven't tried the new one yet. I'm just going to use one.
I call to order this December 11th meeting of the North Allegheny School Board. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will start with our calendar review. This evening, we have our report of academic performance. It will be our last meeting of the calendar year, and then our next meetings will be January 8th, and we will have our Distinguished Achievement Awards at 6, and our meeting at 7, which will include a renovations presentation, and on January 22nd of 2025, we will have our regular meeting. The next item on our agenda this evening is our report of academic performance. We are so excited to have so many wonderful guests in our audience this evening who will be helping with this report. And I will turn it over to Dr. Highland.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. And I too would like to echo Mrs. Warner's sentiments and just thanking the administration for taking time out of their schedules to be here tonight. We appreciate the time and the effort that you put in to help putting this report together. So again, thank you for your time. If you go to the next slide there, that would be great, Kathy. As everyone all knows, we have just passed our strategic plan in September. And one of the things that we need to do as a district is to try and be as focused as we possibly can on making sure that we're meeting those goals. And tonight's presentation deals with the number one goal that we have as a district, other than keeping our kids safe, is to make sure that we provide an academic environment for our students that is rigorous, that is challenging, and that we bring out the very, very best that our students have and maximize their potential as learners. And so tonight, as we do every year, it is time to say how we're doing. We talk about all the good things we're doing. We talk about the areas where we have strength, areas where we have some opportunities to grow. And tonight is that opportunity also for the board to take a look at the data that comes back from those results, ask questions, and engage in dialogue with our building level administrators. I will say this, as the superintendent of the school district, I am ultimately responsible for the scores in this district. I take full responsibility for those, as I'm sure my assistant superintendents do, as I'm sure the principals do, and quite frankly, as I'm sure the board does, because everybody plays a role in making sure that we bring out the very best in our kids. And we need to celebrate when we're doing well, and we need to look at things when we're not doing so well. And so that's what tonight is all about. Next slide. So there is a little nuanced change in the actual title of our presentation. It used to be the report on student achievement. And it's a little bit of a misnomer because at this district for a very long time has focused on achievement. And we should, because it is one of the important markers that we need to look at, or benchmarks to determine whether we're doing well or whether we need some opportunities to improve. But we have to look at other measures to determine whether we are doing well or not. And one of those is our growth numbers. And that's something that we're going to look at a little bit more. Thus, I think the idea of calling it a report on student performance gives it a more holistic look at how our students are doing as a whole. So with that, I am ready to turn it over to our assistant superintendents who are going to go through the data for each individual building by elementary first, and then we'll move on to the secondary. So I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Dow.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us, and I'd like to thank the principals also for being here tonight. We're going to start, so there's a lot of information that goes into putting the report of academic performance together. We will be talking about our PSSA scores, our Keystone exams, our PSATs, National Merit Scholars, SATs, ACTs, advanced placement tests. Of course, we give acronyms to everything, so I should say AP test. And then other notable recognitions that have occurred for our district. So we'll begin with looking at the elementary school PSSA scores. So we want to start by looking at our grade level. These slides are just about achievement, which, as Dr. Hyler mentioned, our achievement does. Oh, can't hear me? I've never been accused of that before. All right. Our third grade looks at, these slides look at the third grade achievement across the district. So those are all, you can hear it now? Okay. This looks across all of our elementary school buildings. So our advanced proficient rate was 87%. I think that is a strength when they're 35 points above the state average. And our ELA in third grade was 85%. That was 29 points above the state average. I will say that our ELA this year was up. Last year it was 84%, and our math was the same at 87% last year. For fourth grade, we have obviously a strength for us is our, and I'm going to go to the next slide, which is our science. Achievement-wise, we were at 95%. That is wonderful, I think, for achievement. Last year we were at 96%, so we're similar to last year. If you'll go to the previous slide, thank you. All right, our math and ELA were both at 82% this year. This is a slight drop for our ELA. We were at 84% last year. Our math, however, did go down some in fourth grade this year. We were at 87 last year in third grade. So that is comparing cohort of student to cohort of student. All right. And grade 5 overall, our achievement is, a strength I would say is in ELA. We're at 86%. Again, that's 38 or 34 points, I'm sorry, above the state average. That's great. Now our cohort only had a slight dip here. We were at 87% last year in fourth grade. And then our math here is at 81%. Again, 34 or 38 points, I'm sorry, above the state average. We did have a slight drop here from our fourth grade last year of cohort of students in fifth grade this year. They were at 87% last year. All right, we're going to look at each individual building. There's a lot of data here, so I kind of just want to highlight some strengths and focus areas for us. At Bradford Woods, I would say our strength is fifth grade math. 98% of the students had solid achievement, and they were well above in growth. So they were exceeding the growth expectation for those students. Science was at 98%, which is great achievement with a meets in growth. 4 of the 5 areas were at 90% achievement or higher, which I think is notable. Some focus areas for Bradford Woods would be our fourth grade ELA with 82%, and our growth was not where we would like it to be at well below. And our fourth grade math at 87% was below. Next, please. Thank you. At Franklin, our strengths would be at 97% for science, which they met their growth expectation. Our fourth grade math had 93% achievement with a well above in growth. And our fifth grade ELA was at 89% with a growth score that was well above expectation. I think one thing to note for Franklin is that all 5 of the areas for growth were either met or well above, which I think is notable. Our focus area here for Franklin would be our third grade ELA, which is at 80%. And the district average when we looked at that was 86%. Next slide, please. For HOSAC, our strengths, I think one thing to note here is that science was at 100% achievement. So all of the students passed the PSSAs with either an advanced or proficient. The growth was at meets expectation. For grade 3 math, their achievement was at 98%. Growth was meets above or well above for 4 of the 5 areas. I think that's a strength. Focus area, we would like to look at 4th grade math. The achievement is good with 91%. We'd like to see an improvement in growth there. All right. Next, Ingomar Elementary. So strength, I think grade 3, ELA and math at 89 and 90%. Growth in 5th grade math was above. Areas of focus, we'd like to look at 4th grade ELA with an achievement score of 77, which was well below for growth. And science, the growth was also well below. The ELA in 4th grade, the district average was 82, so we'd like to see that achievement be raised there as well. In McKnight, a strength, science was at 95%. Would like to see the growth come up from there. It was at below level. Areas of focus would be grade 4, ELA and math with 76% achievement, but well below in the growth area. And grade 5, ELA at 79% achievement with well below growth there. The average for ELA in 5th grade was 86%, and the average for 4th grade ELA in math was 82%. Marshall Elementary, the strengths there are science achievement, 92%, and grade 4 ELA with their growth being well above. Areas of focus would be grade 5 ELA with growth well below, grade 4 math with growth well below, and science growth with well below. And Peebles. Strength would be science. Their achievement was 97% with an above growth score. Areas of focus would be 3rd grade math at 80%. The district average was 88%. 5th grade ELA at 81%, with the district average being 86% and the growth being well below. And 5th grade math at 69%, the district average was 82, and again, the growth was well below. All right, so the elementary action steps, we're going to have a few principals who are going to talk about that. I'm sorry, I'm starting with the first one. So the first action step that I think is really important is that we really need to recognize the need to improve the growth levels of our students. As Dr. Hyland mentioned, I think that we are very strong in our achievement scores in most areas. There are still room for growth there, but I think that we have not focused on looking at that piece that is the great equalizer to make sure that all students are growing every year, so that we know that we have really utilized our tier 1 instructional practices within the classrooms to make sure we're hitting all students and that they are growing each and every year in each and every subject.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Michalowski, the principal at Ingomar Elementary School. And these are some additional steps that we are taking as a group at the elementary level. So it's not just one building. Everybody is doing this collectively. There we go, the slide's back. So first, we've done data meetings in the past. This year, we are all doing 4 data meetings. And if you look at, during the data meetings, we are reviewing student data walls. That's consistent with all of the elementary buildings. We are recording STAR, Study Island, but also looking at the PSSA achievement of our students. And something that is a little bit different is during these meetings, we have more of a focus not only on achievement, because I think we've all done a good job continuously looking at that aspect, but also looking at the students that need to grow. Also, the item analysis is something that we're doing. This is something that's really prevalent when you look at some of the programs that we have. On hands can indicate areas of growth on the PSSA testing, but Study Island also does that. So digging into those items allow teachers not only to group students that need enrichment, which has been not enrichment, but remediation. During COVID, that's something that we focused on, but knowing that we need to grow the kids, we can also look at that content and use it to enrich some of our students, would also assist in growing them.
Tracy, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
For the board members, could you explain to the board members what a data wall is? Because I bet they have no clue what a data wall is.
Sure, I'm sorry. So it's almost like an Excel spreadsheet, and it has all of the students' names per grade levels, and we do this for grades 3, 4, and 5, and we are able to record the data on Study Island as well as STAR, as well as their PSSA scores. And we're able to see as they take the STAR several times a year, if those scores are growing, they're color coded. And if they're not growing, then they can go back to some of the programs and really pinpoint where that growth or lack of growth is occurring. STAR is new. We used to have Exact Path. And I would tell you that teachers are pretty happy with the new STAR program that they're having.
Thank you.
Sure. We're also doing instructional response plans with our teachers in English language arts and math grades 3, 4, 5. Again, using that data, teachers are looking to pinpoint where some of the students need to improve their scores, not only for enrichment, but again, remediation. And one of the nice things is using this data, again, we focused a lot on remediation after COVID, but they can also see the kids that are they're on the cusp of moving to another level, or they're on the cusp of just improving a little bit that will help them grow. And they are using that data to specifically make instructional plans for their classroom, but also for their grouping. And they're able to do that flexibly using that data. Yes.
I'll piggyback Dr. Highlands.
Sure.
So he's probably referring to, I'm the dumb contractor, so I need this like translated into like normal. So you said something in there, it was something instructional plans or something like that?
Yes, instructional
Can you-
response plans.
What is that in normal layman's terms, please?
Yes, so they're using the data and they will pinpoint where perhaps a group of students or the whole classroom, possibly Study Island can measure the whole classroom. On Hands is another program that looks at the data from PSSAs. They can pull those groups of students and they can actually do a plan specific to building those skills up. They've kind of done it in the past, but it's just a more formalized plan. And again, that's ELA and math grades 3, 4, and 5. Yep.
All right, good evening, everyone. Pardon me. I'm Mark Thornton, the principal of Marshall Elementary School. And just to even come off of what Tracy was just saying here about the IRPs, when we do have our data meetings with our teachers and that grade level team, we do report back on that as well and have that documentation. And when we have our monthly meetings with Dr. Dowell, we have those discussions as well. So it's ongoing throughout the school year. Specifically for mathematics, some of the things that we are doing differently this year is incorporating math support into the tiered interventions. And for those of you who don't know what that is that win period that we have in elementary, that what I need. Historically, we would focus on ELA. Now we are branching out and incorporating mathematics into that as well, because there are times where math is something that is an area of greater need for a child. And we have those opportunities now to be able to do that. And that is across all 7 elementary schools. Curriculum writing, writing driven by eligible content. I know Tracy touched on eligible content as well. For those of you who may not be aware, that's like when you have a standard that may be in mathematics that focuses on place value, that is actually then broken down into like 5 other really specific descriptors of what that would look like for place value. And so that's what that would mean. Also working with the AIU for instructional coaching. We have teachers who are working through some professional development through the AIU, and that has been working very well. And then we also just got access to Freckle. That is something that is through Renaissance as well, the STAR assessment, even doing walkthroughs during WIN, having conversations with kids. Do you like Freckle? What do you like better, Freckle or Exact Path? And all of the kids really enjoy using Freckle. And I will even say specifically for Marshall, we have a teacher in-house in our building who actually presents this on behalf of that company. So we have a resident in the building who really knows it, and we really appreciate her support.
Dr. Thornton, I'm going to step in real quick. I'm really pleased with the Freckle pilot that we're doing right now. I believe we have 62 teachers who are piloting the program. And I think the initial response has been great. When I have done walkthroughs in a couple of the buildings, I've been asking students, and the response has been very positive. I'll be really excited in a little bit to see that data, to see what it is doing for our students. And we have a specific plan to make sure that we are analyzing the data, but also getting feedback from the students and staff about how they think that it is working. Because one thing we know about students, if they don't like a program, we may not have as good of results as we could if they were invested into the program.
Hi, I'm Susie Balabach, the so proud principal at Peebles. And I have the opportunity to talk about our action steps at elementary with professional development opportunities because they matter. You knew I was going to get that in there eventually. But so we all have the opportunity, or we have it scheduled this month, which was a really enlightening and helpful professional development that through PVOS, we set up a meeting to review with the teacher and student data in each of our buildings. We also had the opportunity to invite our teachers to do that with us. And it was individually based for all 7 elementary schools, where we just sat down with somebody who can really help us between what the achievement is and what the growth is, and break down our numbers to student and teacher data. And we had the opportunity to do that during a guided plan with our grades. It really was 4 and 5. Some included 3, just so they were on board so they could see the trajectory of where the data was headed. So we either have had that or it's to be scheduled this month. And what you've heard up here is the data meetings. In addition to the data meetings, we continue to have team sharing on all of the reports, because with looking at the data, it's basically, well, we know what it looks like, but what are we going to do now in result of it, right? And sometimes we need some more professional development to see where we want to head with it. We also, and you'll like this, Dr. Helen, we put that student empowerment in there. That's our goal 3. And because we want our kids involved also in their trajectory of what their engagement is and what their connection is, what their motivation is, and get them involved in learning what we're trying to do with them, and have them involved in some of that planning. We will also continue collaboration with our literacy coach and then our newly hired math coach. So we all continue to do that. And then the digital intervention platforms, as talked about already, WAGGLE would be the math intervention in grades 3, 4, and 5. And then we also add an ELA and math. We will continue with Freckle, which we're just getting into, and also our Study Island, which we continue with Study Island. You want me to hand this to you? Do you want to say anything? Okay, then.
One additional thing that we've also done is PDE came out with a new program called Firefly. That's another assessment. It is brand new. We are just learning it. I think we have 12. Is it 12? 13. We have 13 teachers who are also looking at that assessment just as another tool. They volunteered to do this for us. So it'll be interesting to see what results they get with that pilot as well.
Good evening, everyone. I'm listening to the conversation at the elementary, and I can't, I remember when I started teaching over 25 years ago, and a lot of the conversation and the challenges that existed back then materialized in the sense that our main job was to deliver curriculum and cover content. And the focus wasn't so much on individual growth as it much was our responsibility to make sure we covered everything that we needed to cover. And then what came along in 2001, I believe, Leave No Child Behind and accountability and state tests, and the narrative started to change. And I think what we're trying to deliver tonight is this understanding, especially with the department chairs that are in, and I appreciate you gentlemen being here tonight, Mr. Bell, Mr. Omasitz, and Mr. Rack from science and math and English, respectively, because the elephant in the room is there's a higher level of accountability and responsibility in the tested areas that place an a different amount of pressure on those content area teachers and the principals that are in attendance tonight. And the other elephant in the room, and I know I speak for everyone else, this is an exciting time at North Allegheny because our achievement level has been good. In fact, at the high school level, it's been exceptionally good. And we'll talk about some of that data here today. But I'm a middle school guy at heart, and I always will be. And not only is that an adolescent time of development and challenging and chaotic times, but it appears that way with data as well. So it's our job to tackle those challenges as kids are developing at the middle level. And we believe we have answers for that. But what I want to say is we are very fortunate to have the student body and the raw material that exists at North Allegheny, that this is an exciting time. And I appreciate the efforts of the principals and the teachers and the department chairs and the conversations that we are now having that, quite frankly, didn't exist just a few years ago. And I was just as guilty as anyone else because through COVID and many other times, it was social, emotional, and taking care of people. And we accomplished that. Now we got to get back to business and get us back to number one where we all know we should be. That being said, middle school PSSA results. Grade 6, a few things I want to emphasize on as a district. Mathematics, the advanced proficiency rate, 65%, well beyond the difference in comparison with the state averages of a 28% positive. And grade 6 ELA, advanced proficiency, 72%, comparison to the state, 19 percentage points higher. 7th grade mathematics, you could see a 64% proficiency, and ELA an 82% proficiency. Respectively in math, that's a 30% and a 29% ELA positive comparison with the state. I also want to point out, if you look at just for this particular slide, grade 7 mathematics, the -28 difference for below basic. Anything under the advanced proficient row is a good thing. A negative is a good thing. That means we have a 28% difference of students not scoring in the below basic category. So there may be a percentage of students that aren't passing, but we're getting them very close. And that's our job. And as we continue to focus on growth, and it's my job as Dr. Highland accepted full responsibility for the district, I have to accept full responsibility for the secondary team. That's where the STAR assessment and finding tier 1 interventions and those types of strategies to continue to push those students above and beyond where we know and want them to achieve. Moving along to 8th grade, once again, a positive 26% negative difference in the below basic category, but a 23% positive comparison to the state in mathematics, as well as 23% in 8th grade ELA. Moving along to science, 83% advanced proficient rate compared to the state, 54%, a 29% difference in 8th grade science. Moving on to the individual middle schools at Carson Middle School, one thing I would like to highlight, 7th grade ELA, a combined proficiency of 78%, and 8th grade science. Notice 37% of those students at Carson in science scored not just proficient or passing the PSSA in science, but scoring at a very advanced rate at a 37%, 77% overall. Now, looking at the far right column, specific to growth levels, obviously we have some work to do. The greater the negative number, the more evidence that exists that the level of growth is obviously not where we want to be. So closest to 0 is where we want to be, actually above 0, but a minimum to 0 where we're maintaining growth. And negative 11.92 suggests that that's where we have our greatest opportunity for future growth in 6th grade ELA. Moving along to Ingomar Middle School, if you can focus in on the combined proficiency of grade 7 ELA, 84% of our 7th grade students in English language arts pass a passing rating at 84. And also, again, we'll see a theme in science. Mr. Omas, since you have a lot of future scientists coming up across this theme across the middle schools. Grade 8 science, 86% proficiency. Once again, there's also a theme, English language arts, grade 6 ELA, we know is a focus area. So that is something that we're continuing to examine. Moving along to Marshall, the grade 6 ELA continues to be a focus area. A celebration of the 8th grade science and 85% proficiency. And take a look at the Algebra Keystone exam score. As we know, the majority of our students in mathematics take the Algebra Keystone. It's an end of course exam. And the majority of our students at North Allegheny take algebra in 8th grade. So that being said, just to highlight Marshall Middle School, almost 80% of the students that took algebra as a first-time test taker passed that assessment. So job well done to the algebra cohort at Marshall Middle School. Growth areas, as I said, ELA 6th grade and 8th grade also fell well below that 0 mark of maintaining growth in ELA. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Swager at this time for action steps.
Hi, my name is Dan Swager. I'm the principal of Marshall Middle School. Similar to what Dr. Dow had shared for the elementaries, we recognize the need to improve our growth across all subject areas, ELA, math, and science. We believe that we can get that opportunity will the best bang for our buck will be to focus on the 4th and 5th quintile, which is where the majority of our students fall. And so we will look to focus on the students that fall into those quintiles. We'll utilize a goal setting for both small group, individual, and classrooms, as well as targeted interventions. And then we will progress monitor to see where our students are falling within those interventions. And similar to what you heard from the elementary, we are piloting Freckle, and we're gaining feedback about the success of that. We're utilizing Nearpod, which is a part of STAR, which is a great opportunity for our teachers to find lessons to help with those interventions. And all 3 middle schools are working to increase our tier 1 intervention, and we're utilizing the AIU to help with that work. And as principals, we're constantly talking with each other about how we can increase instructional time in those core areas. And so we'll continue to problem solve that and see if we can increase some of that time. And I'll pass it over to Mrs. Hudson.
Carla Hudson, the principal at Ingomar Middle School. Just to echo on a lot of the things that elementary's done, but just to dig a little bit deeper in some of the practices in regards to implementation of our data meetings and what looks like one of the big factors, especially having multiple points, our students coming up in 6, 7, 8 is looking at PFAS projections. So PFAS uses this crazy algorithm to figure out how and project how students perform. So we are able to use that, and most of the time we've always a lot, especially with achievement, we looked at, how do we raise our students that are basic or below basic? And some of what the data is telling us are highest achieving students that are advanced, continue to be advanced, aren't growing. So looking at those projections and having a new targeted focus of identifying who those students are, how do we increase our rigor in those areas and to ensure that they're not just achieving advanced proficiency levels, but they're also growing. So that's a different data point that they haven't done before. And you've heard data from all of these different places. And what does a teacher do when you have 15 different reports? And so we really try the data walls as well as looking at standard eligible content across all the various assessments, as well as the things they're doing in curriculum-based assessments, really trying to synthesize that data because we want them to not only perform on these benchmarks along the way as projections of how they are performed, well, they possibly will perform on the PSSAs, but how do we synthesize to make everyday instructional decisions? We have been really targeted with our meetings with teachers to talk about instructional practices and what are we doing every day to ensure that they're constantly getting 1% better and continuously being challenged. And that's with the help of the IU and really just trying to bring our teams together across the district. I think that was everything.
Thank you. Caitlin Ewing, principal at Carson Middle School, and working with the math department this year in my second year being at Carson Middle School, we recognize we have a lot of work to do. We have fantastic students. We have fantastic teachers that have been challenged with having our students take assessments, but then what do they do with that data? And that's the piece that personally, as a former 8th grade teacher, teaching the Keystone eligible content as well as the 8th grade PSSA eligible content is a challenge. And so a lot of times as humans, we come up with all the different reasons why we are not performing maybe at a certain level, or all the what you want to call them excuses. And I think we've done a great job as a leadership team in working with our teachers, letting them have their voice, get that out there, and then, okay, how do we problem solve moving forward? And some of the very, I don't want to call them excuses, but realities of things are, we just switched to online testing. We have very traditional packets in our classrooms, and our teachers recognize that kids do still really like to write down their strategies that they've been using throughout the year. So incorporating throughout the year in math and ELA and science, those online test taking strategies, because they are, and thankfully the whole state will be, all be going online. So we hope to see that improve across the board, as well as that challenge I mentioned of 8th grade, having the 2 different eligible content. How do we make sure that our kids are placed appropriately starting from 5th into 6th? We have a lot of students that accelerate, and we then recognize that eligible content may be missed because they have accelerated and haven't hit those standards that are then tested on the PSSAs. And then another big topic, I think, is realities. Our kids are tested a lot. And by May, they have test fatigue. How do we keep that culture and that morale that this is really just another measure of how you're doing. And we need that measure to be able to help you be successful in your placement in high school. And so making sure that those conversations with students around the test is not just another thing they have to dread or opt out of, but celebrate that this is another way that we can get a good pulse on what you need to be a successful student in a changing world at North Allegheny. And so as a group at the middle level, we've been really digging in, making sure that we do all those pieces, culture, data, and review and support when it comes to the professional development of the teachers in using that data to help our kids.
All right, if you can go to the next slide for me. So part of our report, we also look at comparator districts. And it's interesting because I had someone ask me how these schools were chosen. These are schools that have been in the report for years. So when we want to look from year to year, we want to keep those same comparator schools so that we can see how we're doing there. So if you look at the list of 16 schools, when we look at our PSSA scores, we have an overall score, and then we have 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So in math, North Allegheny was 7th overall with an achievement of 72%. All the districts across the board pretty typically go down in scores from 3rd grade to 8th grade. For our district, if we look at our 3rd grade score, we would have been tied for 3rd place. By 8th grade, we would have been 14th. So I think there's a little bit of a gap there that we'll look at. For our ELA, overall, we are 9th with an average of 80%. And what was interesting to me was when we really looked at this, math had a consistent drop from 3rd through 8th at most districts. ELA is really all over the place. There wasn't a consistent across the board kind of pattern. So I found that to be a little bit interesting because we had a drop from 3rd to 4th, but an increase in 5th, a drop to 6th, an increase to 7th, and a drop to 8th. So I think those are things that we need to look at as an individual school district and see if we can find any patterns there of why we're having kind of that roller coaster in ELA. And in science, we were overall 9th. In 3rd grade, we were tied for 6th, and in 8th grade, we were tied for 8th. All right. Next is our PVOS PSSA results. So you've heard us talk about well above, meets, below, and well below. What we are really looking for is anything from meets, above, and well above, because that means that we are growing the students the amount that they should be growing during that year's time from one assessment to the next. And I think that's important because it's not about what their bar and they're achieving, it's about what they're learning in that individual year. When we look across the district, we know this is an area that, as we've said all night, that we really do need to look at, and we have some work to do here in this growth area. In math, we have 2 areas, 5th grade and 7th grade, that are meeting that expectation this year. And then 4th, 6th, and 8th, we definitely have some work to do there. And Dave and I have spent some time, Mr. Doramo and I have spent some time really looking at previous results as well, because as everyone knows, 1 year doesn't mean everything. So we're trying to look and see if we can see those consistent patterns and to help us identify where we need to really focus. The next slide, our ELA this year is definitely not where we want it to be. This is something that we are really trying to dig into. I know people have talked about the transition to PSSA Onlines and what did that do here. The hard part is I don't think we can say there's anything definitive with that in the sense that we do have people who still had well above in growth in the ELA areas. So I think we just really have to dig in and figure out why our scores are not where they need to be in this area. And science this year also had a drop and that they were well below in 4th and 8th, even though we have really solid achievement in that area.
Thank you, Dr. Dow.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Are we allowed to ask a question during the?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're describing. There's some things that I still haven't quite wrapped my head around. So as you've mentioned, if you look at performance, at the elementary level, performance seems very good. At the middle school level, a lot of performance seems very good. But as you said, growth is well below where we want it. But when you think about performance, let's think of elementary first, okay? So if you look at performance in an ELA or math at fourth grade and fifth grade, they're performing well at fourth grade and fifth grade, right? So that means
When you say performance, you're speaking achievement.
achievement, yes. So they're in terms of how they're performing, how they're achieving on the PSSA, they're doing well. So for their grade level. So presumably they learned something from grade 4 to grade 5 to continue to achieve well on the PSSA, right? So they couldn't have learned nothing because they wouldn't achieve well, right? And as I look at the achievement scores, they continue to achieve well through grades, but they're not growing. But they're learning something in order to continue to achieve well. So they're not growing as much as they should grow based on some algorithm. And I'm trying to understand in my head what that should look like. So if you have someone that's performing well, that's achieving well at fourth grade, and then grows at the rate that they should grow, does that mean when they get to fifth grade, they should be performing at the level of a sixth grader? That's where I kind of lose my understanding of what growth looks like.
I can try to answer that, and then you could try to jump in. I am unable to describe the algorithm specifically used to calculate what that growth percentage should equate to. What I can describe for you, though, is the process. Each progressive year that a student will move along, third, fourth, obviously there's no growth score because third grade's the first grade.
Right.
Fourth, fifth, sixth, as you move along, let's say eighth grade PSSA. It's called an NCE score. It's exiting the previous grade level year. You are assigned a normal curve equivalent or a scaled score. After the test is taken that year and they exit that grade, they now have a new NCE or scaled score. The difference between those two numbers are what it equates to that negative, zero, or positive number. The confusing part about it is there's an assumption that it's only math to math or English to English, and it's not. For instance, a fourth grade, correct me if I'm wrong, a fourth grade NCE score is pulled from multiple data points. It's all the PSSAs taken before that. Or an algebra score is all the PSSA, English, math, and even some science prior to the arrival of that keystone course. That's why I think it's so difficult for someone to articulate to you what exactly that algorithm is. But even if, and this is what I said to the English curriculum review meeting we just had a few days ago, even if it's hocus pocus, and we looked at scatter plots, we are still not where we need to be in comparison with other schools in the state. So I may not be able to describe the potion, but I do know that we need to drink it. So that's what the challenge is.
So let me just briefly just ask this in a slightly different way. So for example, for ELA, our growth is well below in 4 through 8, right? According to this chart. So my question then is, if they had been growing at the rate they should be growing, based on the algorithm, which we're not going to try to explain, okay, what should they be able to do by the time they get to the 8th grade that they're not able to do now?
I'm not sure that I can answer it that way. Let me see if this helps you of the difference between achievement and growth. So I'm going to go back to the 4th grade science. We had a building that had 100% science. So everybody passed, they got advanced or proficient. Where they only met their expectation for growth was that, let's say they were well below, all right? What that means is that while everybody passed, they didn't score as high as they were expected to score. So for example, we may have had kids who were expected to get advanced on it who got proficient. Or we may have had a student who was supposed to be high advanced and only got mid advanced. So if they're not reaching those ranges of where they were predicted to score, then their growth is lower than they should have. So that's where it's hard to compare achievement and growth. It is what that student should have done and did they do that year versus reaching a benchmark of advanced or proficient.
And Dr. Gibbs, to add on to that, we have our achievement scores are excellent. If we can capitalize on that marginal growth that we are missing, it's sort of what we have been saying in the past. These kids are capable of scoring even higher. These proficiency levels should go up significantly. And I think that's what's keeping us from reaching those highest levels of proficiency is the growth. If we're leaving things on the table, those kids who are advanced, and I'm just going to use a really poor analogy, they may have got a 90% A, but they have another 9% that they could grow, that they are capable of doing. And I think that's what we're missing with some of those kids. And I think we're missing them at all levels. And so we're missing them because we really, as a district, we haven't focused on that. And I'm convinced that if we put just a little bit of focus on those kids, number one, they will benefit from that. Two, we will challenge them and bring out what they're capable of doing because we are focused on it. And I think these bread numbers, they're up there. They're hard to see. They're hard to come before you and share with you. But it tells me that we have so much opportunity to become even better than what we are. And we will, because this group of individuals is committed. When I think about these 3 middle school principals sitting around, they are talking data all the time. And quite frankly, there hasn't been a lot of talk about individual student data, not to the degree that we need to, because we are leaving it out on the table. We're leaving things out there that our kids are capable of more, and we need to bring out more in our kids. We can't bring that out unless we know what our deficits are, and we plainly see where our deficits are. And as a collective group, we're responsible for doing that. We owe that to our community. We owe that to our kids to bring out the very best. And so we shall do that. So
Right.
hopefully that answers your
Thank
question.
you.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? Just so that I understand, you may have explained this and I apologize if I missed it. So when we're talking about growth, are we talking about the same cohort? So if it says well below growth in 6th grade ELA, is that the 5th graders? We knew what they were supposed to do. Now that they're in 6th grade, they did not advance as much. It's that same group of kids?
Yeah, it's their exiting NCE or entering NCE scale score and then exiting NCE
Okay.
scale score, and the difference between the two.
Okay, good, thank you.
So I don't have a question. I'm just going to make a comment. I do think growth is the most important thing, because if you have a student who's here and they're performing at 92%, which we're all thinking, wow, that's fantastic. And they're so high compared to other people in districts in the states and so forth. That's great. But then if the next year they go down to 89%, I'm not so excited. So I do think growth is important. We have a lot of highly intelligent people here in our district, but we need to grow them so that they are even more intelligent. That's what we're trying to do. And so to me, education, this is a part of it. And it's a very, very important part. I think it's easy for some of our students to glide through. And that's not what we want. That's not what we want as educators. We want them growing. We want them to learn more and more, and each year get better and better. So that's just the comment I'll make. I understand how, yes, comparatively, our students are excellent, but I do look at the growth. That's what's important. We want them learning. We want them growing. We want them to go from here to here. So thank you.
One of the aha moments that we discovered because of the focus that we've really put an emphasis on individual student growth. PVOS is a measure of a group of students, not individual students. But what we discovered specifically at the middle school level was an individual instance of great decrease in growth is the best way I could say that. A negative loss greatly affects the collective group of that cohort. And we saw that come to life in various individual student reports. And the lesson learned was every student matters. Now, thankfully, those instances are few and far between where we can have a substantial, significant loss. But we saw an individual student or two where their individual growth was -40, -50, even greater than that. And that had a great impact on the score for that building. So the use of the universal screeners and those types of things that help intervene students for whatever that particular situation may be was a lesson learned for us. And I think it also is a lesson learned for our entire staff. Every student matters in every class. So I think that's a great lesson moving forward. Moving on to our achievement levels. This is a district Algebra 1. I know I highlighted Marshall Middle School specifically with their 8th grade first-time test taker scoring, I believe it was a 79% proficiency. This particular slide is a district examination of Algebra 1, mostly with the spring Keystone last year, so spring of 24. We were at a 64% overall proficiency rating, and we need to understand that includes all students that aren't taking it for the first time. It may be their second or third time, in addition to the students that were first-time test takers. And that was still, that all being said, compared to the state, we were a positive 24% and also a negative, which is a good thing, below basic. So we're getting kids closer and closer to the mark of proficiency as we continue to move along. The next slide is specific to the grade 9 cohort. So these are students, obviously, that were in 9th grade, the graduating class. That's if you add the 41 and 32, 73% proficiency. The next slide should be the 10th grade cohort. Current 10th grade, 70.4% proficient and advanced rate. Now we'll move on to the Keystone Biology district. Now this is first time test takers because this is also an end of course exam, 10th grade biology Keystone exam, 9th and 10th, mostly 9th. Advanced proficiency, 80% is a district. So strong number there compared to the difference of the state, positive 33%. And take a look at the number of advanced compared to the state, 30%. And take a look at the negative on the below basic, 21% less kids in that category compared to the state. So very strong numbers in science across the board. Cohort-wise in science, 81% proficiency in advanced. Once again, those are students that didn't take it in 9th grade, taking it in 10th grade. So first-time test takers in that cohort. Moving along, Keystone Literature. Advanced proficient is a district, 87% proficiency compared to the state. That's 28% net gain. Once again, significant 25% in the advanced column alone for our literature. It was also a high indication of individual student growth. Going back to Dr. Gibbs' point in terms of the multiple data points, when you look all the way back from 3rd grade all the way through Keystone Literature, that was a banner growth indicator for our Keystone scatter plots and another conversation piece with our English language arts team led by Mr. Smith, our curriculum coordinator. So moving on to grade 10, 87% proficiency, proficient and advanced for that cohort. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hibner that can talk about some of the action steps for our Keystones.
Hi. So as you'll see, when we finally get to slide 52, we also recognize that there's a need for improvement in our individualized student growth, and anticipating some historical data that we've seen on the Keystones, we wanted to get out ahead of that. And we did that with the help of Jeremy, who's here tonight, our English department chair. He coordinated and created a guided plan that all of our staff participated in, specific to constructed response. So what we did with that is we are actually, through our SPMs, which is student performance measures, each teacher has to create a student performance measure each year. We gave our teachers some options, but strongly suggested a focus on the constructed response specific to the SIR model, cite, evidence, reason, which are how we strongly recommend our students answer the constructed response, which is seen on every Keystone exam. So that is something that we've actually been focusing on, and our teachers are designing their SPMs under that model. So many departments adopted this as their SPM, and it's present on all 3 Keystones specific to, and Jeremy actually attended this summer a PDE session and knows the scoring of those, so that was really incredibly helpful. We do anticipate piloting the Firefly assessment in algebra and literature in the 2nd semester at NAI, and we're going to provide individualized data, enable instructional design based on these areas of focus. We know that it's being piloted by 13 teachers at the elementary and middle level, and we want to also pilot that in our algebra and English, Essentials of English courses at NAI. We are aware that additional opportunities exist to strengthen our approach to our mathematics. We have focused our professional development on formative assessment this year. That's one of our building level goals based specifically on our data and our feedback. So additional action steps that we've taken are remediation sessions. They've occurred October through November. We've also utilized those times for specific pinpointed remediation to the anchors within the Keystones that we're actually still giving them this week. So we're giving the winter reassessments to our students, and we're focusing on assisting our students with meeting testing proficiency. Next slide. Digging deeper into our data, we actually are having individualized meetings with our content level teachers, and in guided plan, our teachers all went through a PBOS overview just to give them an idea of what is PBOS, deep dive into it. But what we're doing with our teachers and our core content teachers are having coaching sessions. So the teachers of algebra, bio, and English that have the PBOS data have had a meeting at this point with an administrator where we went through, really dug deep into their data. So we're doing that in hopes of helping them understand the PBOS data and helping them to recognize what are the instructional strategies that they need, what are the professional development needs that they need. And to continue our professional development on the STIL standards, we're also asking and digging deeper on our assessment audits for our depth of knowledge and our frequency of standards being assessed. All 3 administrators are currently actually running book studies with our teachers. Just not all of the teachers I should say that are on differentiated supervision. All 3 of the books that we chose focus on generating thinking classrooms and strategies for implementation, but more importantly, cultures of professional sharing. So another action step that's not up there, but I thought was relevant in case it was a question to be asked this year, in looking at comparative data, we actually have also focused on decreasing our mathematic classroom sizes. We have our academic algebra classroom sizes are a 1:15 ratio. Our impact classes are at a 1:6 because they are co-taught, and our algebra 1 is at a 1:10 ratio because it is co-taught as well. That's it. Thank you.
Comparator district Keystone scores.
A couple questions. Back to the action steps. So I think this is the second maybe slide, or this is the second time I remember reading this. One of these action steps is math curriculum writing driven by eligible content. Can you decode that into like someone so that I can understand what that means, please?
Sure. It's actually something that we're working on bigger. It's bigger than just NAI. So taking a look at what is the eligible content, and the eligible content is what are the testing areas within the Keystone exam. So not just utilizing the book as the resource, but what are the content areas in the Keystone, and making sure that we're actually hitting that. That's actually a conversation I just had with one of my algebra teachers. The algebra teacher that I met with said, I need help understanding better what the content is on the exam. So we're taking a look at using the SAS website, digging deeper into what is the eligible content that is more than likely going to be on the exam. It's pretty scripted on the Keystone for math. I can tell you that bio has a harder time because it fluctuates from eligible content from year to year. But algebra, we have a pretty good idea of what's going to be on there. So the eligible content are the content areas, and making sure that we're hitting those. And more importantly, the conversation that we are having in these coaching meetings are taking a look at not only what are we teaching, but what are the students mastering and learning. Just because we covered it doesn't mean the students learned it. So those are the conversations that we're having when we're really looking at the assessment data, taking a look at those assessments. What are the standards that are in the assessments? What is the level of knowledge question that is in the assessment? Are we asking recall questions, or are we actually asking higher level questions? So we're getting that deep in these conversations with the teacher to ensure that the assessments are actually digging deep into application and not just recall.
Mr. Winiger, I think I could do it a little bit shorter than that.
Well, I was going to say a
Sorry.
summary is we're not teaching to the test, but we're finding stuff that's in the test and we're making sure we hit that.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then can you decode in 30 words or less the second bullet point for me, please?
The Firefly?
The review of math matrix for student placement with focus on multiple and growth measures.
That was just me stating that we're aware that you already heard that the middle school is doing that.
Okay.
It's a continuum.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, the comparator districts, as it relates to the achievement level of the three keystones, you could see that our greatest area of opportunity in growth is with the Algebra 1 Keystone Assessment at a 70% achievement in comparison to the other schools. Literature, we're at the 89% and 81% in biology. And just to reference this again, I believe you said there were 16 comparator districts. And these are districts that are similar in terms of achievement, possibly the budget expenditure, demographics, et cetera. So this isn't just a random collection of schools in the state of Pennsylvania. So I'm saying it is obviously an opportunity for growth, but one that we will accept as a challenge. PVOS Keystone, I don't want to be redundant in terms of the comments that Dr. Hibner's already addressed, but you could see specific to our biology and literature, or we're well above the growth index, the entering and exiting NCE scaled score, and we're obviously under zero at minus 3.10 for an opportunity with our algebra. And I know Dr. Swager spoke about the quintiles and our students that tend to be accelerated or almost being exposed to content beyond some of the areas that they're tested more in the PSSA than algebra, but those opportunities for growth still do exist in the Keystone Algebra PVOS. Preliminary PSAT scores, you could see here in comparison from last year's, we have an increase in participation. Juniors, 241 juniors with the total mean score, the average of the averages, if you will. The PSAT is broken up into the evidence-based reading and writing and the mathematics. Adding those two scores together, you could see that the total mean score for our juniors was 1212. In comparison with the state, that's a positive 242 points increase. And for our sophomore class, 119 students participated PSAT with a total mean score of 1187. That's an even greater increase of 260 total points compared to the state of Pennsylvania. The National Merit Scholarship results, currently 16 seniors in the graduating class of 2024 were named National Merit semifinalists. 39 seniors were named commended students in the 2024 National Merit Program, and 16 seniors, which is phenomenal, were named finalists in the 2024 National Merit Program. For the SAT, you will notice an increase in numbers, especially in our report of student progress that goes a little bit deeper. But for the purpose of this presentation, fall season 2023, 384 total students participated in the SAT with a total mean score, adding both evidence-based reading and writing and mathematics together at 1264. That is 171 points higher than the Pennsylvania total mean score average. And our North Allegheny Spring Senior 2024, 385 students with a 112 point increase compared to the Pennsylvania score for total means for the SAT. ACT, you will notice from 22-23 to 23-24, and pretty much from 2020 moving forward, there's been a decrease in the number of students participating in the ACT, which a correlation is because there's been an increase in the number of students that are returning back to the SAT. And I also, in conversations today with Dr. Hibner and Mr. Buchak, Pitt and Penn State, correct me if I'm wrong, do not recognize or accept the ACT scores. A lot of the Western schools in the country are more in a acceptance of a recognition of the ACT, and our students are erring on the side of participating in the SAT. That being said, our mean score really has been consistent, somewhere in the high 27 point whatever in the 28. So a slight decrease in comparison for 22 to 23 from a 28.5 mean score in reading, in English across the board, but the composite score is at 28.2, which is an increase from last year of 0.2 of a decimal point. And as you know, ACTs, math, science, and English reading. AP results. Take a look at the emphasis. AP students with scores 3 or higher, 2023, 692 students. And we actually increased that this past year by 12 students. And you will notice a very moderate decrease in the overall percentage of total AP students with the score of 3 or higher. But, you know, there is a balance of the number of students we wish to continue to increase, to expose to a more rigorous College Board curriculum. There's a lot of research and data out that is in support of providing more opportunities for students to be exposed to AP curriculum and content. And it does build that level of grit and persistence and perseverance, which allows them to be more successful as they continue their college or their learning experience at a higher level institution, whether that be college or other avenues. So we're going to continue to focus on that moving forward. Our AP Scholars with distinction, 238 students receiving AP Scholar with distinction. AP Scholar with honor, 55 students receiving this honor. And the AP Scholar Award granted to students who receive scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. 108 North Allegheny students received this honor in 2024. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Buchak here to talk about AP recommendations moving forward.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again. My name is Matt Buchak, and I serve as the principal at North Allegheny Senior High School. With this, I just want to say thank you. The excellence that we achieve at our high school is a direct reflection of the commitment of our students, families, communities, and of course, our 7 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, our 9 through 10th grade high school, and all of us together. With that, as you could see, the achievement, if you will, with these exams, AP, PSAT, SAT, ACT, NACD, as we continue to go on, we could see that our students do achieve and they put forth that level of excellence. With that, we need to continue to analyze the results and share with our curriculum senate of all the different data points from the ACT and so on and so forth. But just digging into the AP suite itself, it's a robust opportunity of resources for our staff. We like to increase the professional development in the areas of the AP classroom and also through the AP potential. And that kind of leads into where we want to be as a district. Do we want to continue or look to explore into the pre-AP program? And if that were to be the case, for every AP course that we offer, there's a pre-AP course to help prepare our students for that. It's a College Board preparatory course. It allows us to really dig in and prepare our students. So one of the questions also came about was, how can we get more students to participate within an AP course itself? We've increased AP course offerings by offering 3 AP pre-calc sections this year, in addition to 3 AP environmental science sections this year. We're going to be administering over 2,000 AP exams this year. Last year, we had close to 1,900. So the Burrow Center and NAI and all of us, we're ready to rock and roll. That within itself is a humongous lift, and a lot of credit to all those who are a part of that. With that, we're going to continue the work. I'm up for any questions or any type of interpretations you have on any of these scores. Hi, Libby.
Thank you. Again, not a question, just something in the future, and I mention this every couple of years. If there's any way when we are looking at the ACT and SAT scores, if we could show our comparator districts, what their average is. I'm always a little bit curious about that. I remember one year I was excited because our students are so advanced and they had increased their score. But then when I looked at comparators, we hadn't increased as much as them. And I think that that's important because when we're talking about colleges using those scores for entrance, we definitely want our kids getting into the future universities of their choosing. So I'd love to see that as part of the slide in the future if possible. Thank you.
I believe that was a talking point with Mr. Miller that really has helped tackle the AP, along with Mr. Buchak and Ms. Insana, who's our AP coordinator at Nash. I'm not certain that we have access to the other comparator scores as part of our access to the AP College Board, but that is something I'll double check and confirm. But I believe that is the reason it may be absent on the report.
We could just call and ask. That's where I got them before when I was wondering.
We'll have to say AP honor code when we get those scores from those other schools.
We've always done our students really excel and we have more taking the AP exams, and I'm thrilled over that. But I'm always sort of curious on the ACT and SAT, how we're doing comparatively to others, because, some of the larger schools, at Penn State, they sort of take that GPA and that SAT score, and you're either those above here are accepted and those below. So comparators can be important in some of those type of things. So thank you.
As Mr. Buchak referenced in his comments as well, the NACD exam, this is a reflection of an opportunity for our students that attend A.W. Beatty to seek excellence and celebrate their achievements as well. You could see we had 40 students attempt to receive credentials. Not all programs at A.W. Beatty offer the National Occupational Competency Testing. Only various programs do. For example, auto mechanic, cosmetology, HVAC, robotics are just a few of those. Of the 40 students that sought that credentialed certification, 23, 57.5%, and 13, 32.5% received that credentials. 4 students scoring basic, and that totals out the 100% for that certification. But we wanted to make sure to highlight their success as well. I'll turn over to Dr. Dow.
All right, and for the end here, we have some other notable recognitions. Niche is something that I've seen on a lot of the billboards here. North Allegheny was named the #1 school district in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. Niche also named NASD the 2nd school district in the state of Pennsylvania. I think that's wonderful to hear. And in 2022, we were 3rd, so we moved up a spot. Got 1 more to go. And then I think this is really a nice thing to realize is that we have the #1 spot for the best elementary, for the best middle school, and the best high school in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. And last, the Pittsburgh Business Times. So we continued with the same rank here of #7 overall. But I would like to point out that when you look at the chart and individually, we did have an improvement. Our 11th grade went from 8th last year to 5th this year. 7th grade went from the 8th spot to the 7th spot. 4th went from the 7th spot to the 4th spot. We did have one decrease in 5th grade. We went from 3rd to 4th. So we had some improvements overall there in the Pittsburgh Business Times. I know this was a lot of information, and again, I'd like to thank everyone for helping us to put this together and giving us their input and all the work that we are doing this year to really focus on the academic excellence that we want to have in North Allegheny.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciated this presentation, and I'd like to open it up to the board for questions and comments. Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. I just wanted to thank you all for being here this evening, the principals, the department heads, and our curriculum coordinator. We especially appreciate it as it's after a full school day in the midst of our winter concert season, as well as, of course, holiday season. There's so much you all do for our students, all while making it look effortless. I appreciate all the work you're doing within your buildings with this data. It's very clear that how much focus there is on improvement, which is admirable given how well our students already do. I just wanted to note in the notes longitudinal results, the district's test scores were, with very few exceptions, better than our scores pre-COVID, which is everything to do with what happens in our buildings and how hard our teachers work to meet our students' needs. Thank you all for this presentation and for everything you do for our students every day.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy. Dr. Simkowiak.
Thank you again for being here. I just love a good quality improvement project, and this sort of covers a lot. The one comment I would make is for some of these metrics, it might be helpful to actually obtain some information from the end users. I'm not suggesting that we should have parents and students design our curriculum, but maybe there's some insight that they can provide with a couple of these metrics, you know, things that we may be missing on the professional side of things, the expert side of things, that really you only get from talking to the end users. I'm not saying that we need to do it for every single one, but if there's a place where we're really lagging, whether it's in performance or growth, maybe a combination of surveys or targeted interviews with students and or parents might provide some insight, or maybe not. But it's not going to hurt to try. I see this a lot, even in my own professional life. I can hand out scripts for mammograms till I'm blue in the face, but if none of the UPMC facilities are scheduling them for 8 months out, I can sit there wondering why nobody's getting a mammogram done. But at least until I talk to the end user and they tell me, hey, I called and I can't get an appointment until next July. So for some of these, it might be useful to get some information from students and or parents. It may drive some of the interventions, because a lot of the interventions that you described really do come from the perspective of an expert, and maybe the end user can be useful as well.
Anyone else? Mr. Weniger.
Thank you. I have a couple, well, really just one question or two questions. So I think this is kind of similar to what Dr. Gibbs was perhaps asking. You know, speaking in broad strokes, the achievement at the elementary level is generally pretty good. And then when you look at the middle school, that achievement is not so good. So is there any insight as to what is happening when they go from elementary to middle school?
I can speak to that. Obviously, looking at the eligible content and how the middle school, the structure changes. But one of the biggest conversations is around accountability. We know Keystones is a graduation requirement. And as 6th, 7th, and 8th, they get closer and closer to that graduation requirement, they're recognizing that PSSAs may not, in their minds, have as much weight. And so we really need to work as a system and building that culture of this is just another measure, a checkup for you, because you'll see, especially in the 8th grade, the difference in how much they take the Keystones seriously versus the PSSA. And other schools, though, have the same challenge, so we're looking to see how to help balance that, as well as infuse some of the practices that elementary school teachers do with grace and talent at the middle level.
Well, I can promise you that Kermit can find some money for some pizza parties, all right, to try to encourage these kids to take these tests seriously, okay? You know. But no, I mean, like that would, may not be the worst idea in the world, right? Is to do something of these team building activities, encourage these kids to have fun, do this, and if you do well, we'll do something fun, you know.
Mr. Winiger, can I will add a little bit to that. Although I would love the pizza party and I'd love to be invited to all of them. I think probably the most important thing is a student has as they go through school are their teachers. Their teachers have a significant influence on how they go about their school day. I think just there are teachers emphasizing the importance of this is just a dipstick of where you are. And we're trying to see how we can take what you've learned in this and how we can get you better. I think our teachers talking more about it, the importance of it, I think is probably the biggest thing that we could possibly do, is getting them to get our kids to buy in, to take it seriously. That is a teacher is a powerful thing. I think we should use some of those powers that they possess because we have the best teachers around. And so I think just reemphasizing that would have a huge impact.
Thank you for saving us from spending thousands of dollars on pizza parties.
We didn't axe those, by the way. You gave free reign on that. So thanks.
Another question I had, I think Dr. Swager, you mentioned this, it was in your slide. I think one of the action steps for the growth, I think you said, was to address growth focusing on the high achieving quintile. Could you just elaborate on that? I mean, as again, from a layperson, it sounds like we're going to focus on the high end versus the whole body.
So the majority of our students fall in the fourth and fifth quintile, which is built from their achievement. And so the state breaks it out into 5 different quintiles. Ours, in a good way, fall into the fourth and the fifth. So when we focus our energy, we want to go in and find the students in those fourth and fifth quintiles and figure out how we can help them to specifically address any sort of eligible content that maybe they advanced. So I don't want to go too specific here. When we look at students who had advanced over a sixth grader who's in the 7th or 8th grade level math, they have been advanced their entire career as a student, but their growth score is falling because you can show a negative growth score and still be advanced your entire career. And so what we feel like we can do is expose them to the eligible content that they missed or did not necessarily grasp when they advanced through those courses. And to be honest, we probably could just hand it to them. They're so intelligent, they could just pick up on it right away. And so we feel like if we can focus our efforts in those fourth and fifth quintiles and help the students and really enrich those students, we'll see those growth scores increase overall because that's where the majority of our students fall.
Yeah, and I think, maybe trying to lead the witness a touch here, but we're not ignoring the other kids, right? And I think
no, we're not ignoring the other students. The reality is we feel like we do a really great job of providing interventions to support students who may need those interventions who have barriers to learning. And honestly, the hard work is the fourth and fifth quintile, trying to help students who have been extremely successful their entire academic career, and essentially telling them you may need to do a little bit more because your growth is slipping. But I appreciate it.
And the other thing I'll add to that, Mr. Winiger, are those data walls that we talked about earlier, is knowing where each individual student is. And not necessarily, and these principals know who those students are, but it's most important that the teachers know who those students are within their own classroom so that they could have targeted interventions, whether they're in the fifth quintile or whether they're in the first quintile. Knowing where they stand is a huge, how can you move forward if you don't know where you stand? And so if they know where each one of those kids stand, we're off to a good start then.
Yeah, and the last thing I have to say, I think it's a statement, not a question, but I don't mean to speak for all of us here, but I think we all feel a similar vein about this. We hear us talk about growth. I think for us, again, putting in a layperson's team, growth is really basically for me is challenging each student, right? That's what I think of when I say growth. It's challenging every person and basically almost having a personalized educational experience for every different child, right? And challenging each person to do better, whatever that is. And so I think for me and probably for us, I think the growth is really like that tide that lifts all ships. So I think if we are like dead set on growth, because I think we feel that if we do focus on that, every student across the board is going to be challenged, and everyone is going to, achieve those achievement scores where we want to go. But so just so you understand why I think all of us keep beating growth. I think, to me, that's what it, is challenging these kids, every kid.
Ms. Faber, before you go, I just wanted to circle back and clarify. So when you talk about the quintiles, the quintiles are determined by statewide. So it's not North Allegheny. So we have more, our quintiles are not even. We have more students in the 4th and 5th quintile because it's determined statewide what the quintiles are, not district-wide. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Ms. Faber.
Well, first I wanted to say thank you to all of you guys for all the hard work you put in, and it's not gone unnoticed by your students, even though it may seem like that sometimes. Now, I was curious. You have a lot of new programs that you're using for growth, like STAR, Firefly, and Freckle. And I was curious if, specifically to the elementary school and middle school principals, if you think that all of these new programs that are pushing academic success become too overwhelming or have too much pressure put on the students, and if it varies between the elementary and middle school levels.
I can try and answer that for you. So STAR is similar to, I'm not sure if you took Exact Path when you were there. So that's given 3 times a year. It's a benchmark. It takes about 25 to 30 minutes per student. So I don't think that's overwhelming. I think Freckle is something that is much more engaging, and that's part of why we went away from Exact Path, because we heard from the students that they just really didn't like it. In fact, I heard other choice words that I won't share here. So we really wanted to find something that was more engaging, that would allow them to do some activities independent that are individualized for the student. So what you might be doing on Freckle is going to be very different than me, because it's based on my results and yours is based on your results. So I think for students that helps them to feel more successful, because they aren't doing something that is maybe at a frustration level. They're doing it at a level that they should be doing it at. I don't know that we're putting too much pressure on them, in that we're trying to do different things to meet their individual needs. So hopefully we are not doing that, but I think that's something that we need to have conversations with the students to find out if they are feeling that way. Because, one of the things with our balanced scorecard that we really try to be cognizant of, academic excellence is one of our goals, but also is the mental well-being of our students. So we want to really balance that and not push one way versus the other. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I had a couple comments and questions. It's really encouraging to see how we hold our own at the state level, but I really find the comparator districts really interesting to see, because my understanding is we originally chose those because they're similar size as us and similar free and reduced lunch ratio. So I think that is the group we should be comparing ourselves to get against. And while we look great compared to the state, we're really just right in the middle with our comparator districts. And I just have a lot of faith in our staff and our students that, if we put the effort in, we really can do much better than that. And I'm really hopeful that we can get there with all your guys' help and our great students that we have in our district too. Okay, I'm going to skip some of these, but I'm going to go to, is there anything that you guys would like us to know as board members about testing, PVOS, growth, any of that anyone thinks that maybe because we're not educators that we have missed out on and that we should know? No? Okay. So another question I have is, how can we support you guys? What do we not know because we sit up here and we're not in the buildings every day? How can we support you so that you can become instructional leaders in your buildings? Is there anything that as a board or as administrators that we can do to help you? And if you don't have an answer tonight, maybe it's something you can think about and get back to us, because I think as board members, we want to know how we can help you. And I believe I speak for our administrators that they would like to know the same thing.
I would share that balance so important. As Mr. Dramer was talking about some of those negative growth measures, and some of the extremely negative growth measures that we have seen, those are students that we know their whole story. And so that one day when they came in to take that test is not written in the report. But it can take an entire quintile to a different level, different red level than we've seen. And so I think it's important and helpful that we're talking about the balance and helping us do what we need to do every day to do all of those pieces on the balance scorecard. Because the reality is, when we walk in every day, safety and wellness is number one when we're dealing with students.
Thank you. I have a question about that comment. So, and I'm not trying to be combative, it's just truly just like it's very interesting. So, you know, if someone does have a bad day and they test well, right, that's not exclusive to North Allegheny, right? Kids have bad days all over the place. Is there a certain strategy that other school districts may employ that we're not doing? That can you have kids take a test a different day? Like, could you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think accountability of the PSSAs, we have to talk as a system of, is it something that, you know, these same kids that might not be doing well in PSSAs are doing fantastic at the AP level. So it's a balance I know every school district's dealing with, but to your point, in your question, the accountability and helping our teachers and our students still feel that value, and I think changing the narrative of it is just another checkup on how you're doing versus the high stakes. And that balance of helping our kids want to do their best on that test when it's not a graduation requirement. Because I've lived both worlds of high school and PSSAs, and you see the difference when it is a graduation requirement. I'm not saying let's make PSSAs a graduation requirement, but how do we help also with just the culture of the PSSAs at that middle level? Because kids are starting to not just do what we tell them to do.
I think a piece will be helpful this year. STAR data is almost like PBOS data. It's looking at growth and it's looking at specific students over time, and it's adaptive. Where the PSC, or the Sunny Island data, is almost like achievement data. It's based on some standards. Kids are getting the same questions. So students, especially our high quintile groups, I would say a lot of lower socioeconomic students, they're quintile students that might be performing in 1 or 2. It's really much easier in a way to grow students that are performing lower. You're going to see more growth that way because they're below basic. They still, we might have got them to basic, or their growth measure, where when you have students that are at 98 and you're trying to get them to 99, that percentage to stay at 98 is a little, sometimes could be more difficult. But the comparative piece be that how students they're showing consistent growth by the take our third STAR assessment and the projection of it. So you can see they've taken 4 different growth measures and then they perform the PSC. Was it just a bad day or do we have this predictor? So I think looking at multiple pieces of data are also really important. When our kids come in every day and what they perform, they're coming into an environment that, you know, that's warm, that's welcoming, that things are on the wall, that there's not such a rigid environment of sterile that happens during the PSCs based upon the rules that we have to abide by. So looking at all those measures to complete a kid's story and complete a kid's data story, I think will also be really helpful and help us put and implement strategies for the future.
Thank you.
I would also add to the expectation of the most valuable resource that we can ask for and that we have, which is limited, is time. So we understand that the balanced scorecard was developed as a strategic comprehensive plan. It's a 5-year plan with some goals for us at the end of those 5 years. There's obviously, as you can feel the pulse in the room, a sense of urgency. It is a 5-year plan, not like the Pittsburgh Pirates 5-year plan, which resets every 5 years, but we understand the strive for excellence. And I think the tier 1 interventions, the common assessments, I know Mr. Bell and I have talked about this specifically in the mathematics. The common assessments are only valuable if we're looking at the data that the data provides us and then making instructional adjustments based on that data. But that's our responsibility as the administrators to find ways to have those communications with the teachers and to find ways to do that. Balancing the expectation of covering the content. And you have 36 weeks and units of instruction, but do we need to cover the content or master the learning? And that constant reevaluation of where we are today and where we want to go. And the reality is next year's report on student achievement is already being calculated right now. And in a few months, the scores will be in. That's the reality of where we are.
I was really happy to hear this discussion about getting the kids to engage and seeing the value in this test, because when I read it in the report and in the presentation, I was concerned it was like more, like, oh, this is another very important test you need to take. And I think that's one of the reasons some parents opt out, because they don't want to put that pressure on their kids. And so I'm really happy to hear that approach that I'm kind of hearing throughout the room tonight, that explaining to students that this is a tool that can help you succeed, because if you know where, if you're doing well, you're going to need this stuff moving forward. And, I'm sure kids hate TDAs, but I'm happy our kids are tested on TDAs, because I'm an engineer, and my understanding of a TDA is you're reading multiple different things and you're putting together an essay talking about that. I was an engineer, but when I was writing reports on air quality permits, I'm taking the information from the state code, from visiting the facility, from other facilities that are similar, and the information in their file. And I'm taking information from all these different sources and putting it together. And I think that's something that's the kind of writing we do in the real world. And so I think there's some valuable things in these tests. And I want our students to see, if I excel in these, it's going to help me not only in, elementary school and middle and high school, but beyond. So I'm really happy to hear that approach, and hopefully we'll get some of our students maybe who have opted out and are not taking it seriously to see the value in these tests, instead of thinking, it's just another exam I need to sit for.
Can I add one other comment?
Certainly, Dr. Gibbs.
So I had an opportunity the other day to meet with some fifth grade students at McKnight Elementary. And one of the questions that came up was about homework. And what this conversation is making me thinking about is that not as in our attempts to challenge the kids and help them to grow faster, that part of that also is about how they engage with the material, and whether or not the time that they're spending engaged in problem solving or working on homework or doing a project is efficient or not efficient. Are they just checking a box? Are they really engaging with the material in a way that's going to help them to improve at an efficient rate? So when we talk to the kids, the thing they love to talk about most is the activities they're all involved in. So there's a lot of activities that the kids are involved in. They have very busy lives. They go home, they have to immediately get ready for their next activity, and then there's a lot of other things they have to do. So what happens to their homework? So some of them do their homework in school because they want to get it out of the way. Some of them spend very little time doing their homework home because they don't have the time. So it's like checking a box. So I would be interested to know whether you think part of this challenge that we have is that the kids haven't learned how to use that time that they're engaged with the material efficiently and effectively, so that they're growing faster and they're understanding better, rather than just checking the box and turning it in and they know they're going to do okay because they're smart kids. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know whether there have been discussions about that. Maybe our student rep could comment on that. But it just occurs to me from that discussion we had with the kids the other day.
I will say one thing. It's very hard to teach every kid the way that they are best taught, because some kids prefer to learn while standing. Some prefer to learn while sitting. Some are visual learners. Some are hands-on learners. It depends, and it's different for all kids. And the efforts that are put in right now of teaching to a wide range of students is exceptional in our district, as far as my experience goes. That's all I was really going to say, but it's difficult, but I think that right now the administration is handling it very well.
I'd also like to add too that looking at homework is one thing that we are working on to make sure that we're making homework relevant for the students, not just busy work. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with the administrators about that, and I know they're having conversations with their teachers, because some parents want homework sent home because they want to be able to do worksheets and things, but we want to make sure that we're making homework something that is really beneficial for the students, not just to, as you said, check a box. So we are absolutely having those conversations about that because we want to make sure it's important and will help the students, not just to do it.
And so I'd really like to end on a positive note. And so I am wondering if anyone has anything that they would like to share with the board that they're excited about, that they're looking forward to helping improve students' achievement and growth scores, or anything that you've done that so far this school year maybe that has been really well received and you're happy about the results. Anybody have anything?
Our data meetings have been great in regards to
Mm.
celebrating growth. So
Mhm.
I think to share
Mhm.
that's not always been positive this year, but I think that our data recently has been pointing it out them. Like, you're doing good things. Let's celebrate that. So those have been really good conversations.
That's great. Mr. Rack?
I was going to say, I think this shift towards a focus on growth lines up really nicely with the ELA curriculum review that we just started. We had a really great conversation at our meeting last week just about the concept of growth as an approach to teaching and learning. And obviously, since we are lacking some of the growth we like to see in ELA, I think the timing of this is perfect for us to sort of reshape our thinking for ELA specifically about how instruction and assessment is going to look in a growth-focused approach. And so that is exciting for us. I think Steve and Dr. Hibber would agree, and as well would agree. Like, we've had some really productive conversations already about that idea. So the timing of it for me is exciting. I think it opens a lot of doors for us going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Bouchard? Yeah.
Sure. I think the incorporation of an activity period in our high school has been beneficial. The feedback we've received from our students in particular has been very positive. Some use it for study time, some use it to meet with other teachers, most use it for clubs and activities. I think it's something to really explore. We visited Thomas Jefferson the other day, and there's an opportunity throughout their schedule where students can meet with their teachers. It's flexible with their lunch and whatnot. It's just a neat way to approach the day where our students, they seem to enjoy it, but find great benefit out of it. And our staff, they seem to enjoy it as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Thornton?
I'll say one of the-
Dr. Thornton. Yeah.
One of the things I will say is some of the pieces that you don't see in the presentation are when you drill down to the actual teacher and their individual performance, because there are areas to really celebrate there. Some of our teachers who are in the really deep blue, well above. And so recognizing those individuals within our buildings, and that really sparked conversations across grade levels. What are you doing well that you could share with another grade as you're writing TDAs and so forth? So there's been a lot of positive growth in that area too.
Excellent.
Great minds think alike.
Okay.
So
Where's that?
So it was interesting.
She matters too.
In the ELA, a lot of times the days get very busy, and professional conversation in supporting strategies that teachers are using is so important. And often teachers stop each other in the hall. Hey, I have a question. So today they sat down during the guided prep, we made it work in grades 3, 4, and 5. All of the ELA teachers sat down and really spoke about strategies that they were using, and the ahas went off. I didn't know you were doing that. I know it's in the curriculum, but the way you're doing it is going to benefit my students. So affording them that time to not just, hey, in the hallway, and really sit down and discuss the strategies and things that are working that they didn't know other teachers did are so beneficial to the kids too. They don't have to relearn everything. They can tweak it through the grade levels. And that was so wonderful to see the teachers do that today. And I know you mentioned the teachers that maybe are getting better scores. Other teachers are seeking them out and get another professional strategy. Sometimes it's humbling to know somebody did something better than you, but it's awesome that our teachers are willing to consider those teachers and go to them and have those conversations.
That's wonderful.
Go ahead and Dr. Swager, do you have something? Schools to watch?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We recently were identified as a school to watch through the Dawn Icon Schools to Watch Committee, which was a wonderful opportunity for our building to essentially go through an audit based on certain criteria to ensure we are doing what we hoped we were doing. And through that process, which the process was really the best part of it, we were identified as the schools to watch. So, thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. And I also wanted to mention, Dr. Hibner, that I had a parent who attended your coffee this morning that called me up and was very excited to hear about some of the stuff you had talked about at the parent coffee today, especially using AI to help teachers tailor their tests to make sure they were hitting curriculum, different eligible content, and the, what else did she say? The eligible content and like making questions of certain rigor. So she was really impressed with what you had said. And
Shout out to Carla, because we actually got that idea from Ms. Hudson.
Oh.
We've been doing it in our coaching.
Well, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much. But thank you. I was really excited to hear a parent call me up and have happy things to say. So that was wonderful, a wonderful part of my morning.
Can I end with some really good news?
Yes, please.
You can all leave.
Thank you all so much. We will move on to the rest of our agenda, and we will start with Ms. Hardy with the approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. This evening, the board has 2 items for board action to approve the minutes for the November 13th and November 20th board meetings, and I so move.
Second.
Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, we are ready for the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed and passes unanimously.
And I apologize. I have made a gaffe. I did not ask for speakers on voting items. The audience has cleared out quite a bit. Is there anyone who would like to speak on a voting item?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she's somebody else who will ask the questions if needed.
Yeah. I apologize for that, but I believe that we are good here. So now we can move on to our student activities report. Ms. Faber.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. With the help of our teachers, staff, and students, NAI made it to our goal of 5,000 cans during the canned food drive in November. I would like to highlight a generous donation made by Mr. Stefko on the last day of the canned food drive. We donated all of the cans and money we received to the North Hills Food Bank. We have since commenced the Season of Giving event, also cooperating with the North Hills Food Bank. Each homeroom is responsible for 1 child whom they will be gathering gifts for and bringing down to our collection point on December 12th, tomorrow. Many homerooms already have piles of toys which they are excited to drop off and wrap tomorrow. The parents of these children will come to pick up the gifts after school that day. We are so fortunate that we can all take part in blessing these families this holiday season. The Interact Club is also getting in the holiday spirit. They plan to create and display decorations for Winter Wonderland at NAI, as well as volunteer at McCandless Winter Festival. In November, NAI Interact created 75 cards for veterans that will be shared at Virginia hospitals during the holiday season. They also sent 21 letters to senior citizens living in nursing homes this month. 50 members of Interact from NASH and NAI combined attended the Get Stuffed with Love Thanksgiving meal packing event, where they helped pack over 4,000 meals that were delivered throughout the city of Pittsburgh on Thanksgiving Day. Members also created gingerbread houses for the City of Pittsburgh annual display and art entries for the Fairchild Challenge at Phipps Conservatory. The Multicultural Student Union is currently planning their next holiday celebration for Hanukkah. They currently have their display in the front of NAI for Diwali, which is a Hindu festival of lights. During the Musicians Society, during their weekly meeting on Friday, they are preparing for a recital in the spring, as well as playing at Woodlands on December 14th. They recently got to play at senior living homes on December 1st. There is one more item for board consideration this evening, which is a speech and debate team trip to Bloomsburg University in Bloomsburg, PA, to compete in a drama festival. Thank you.
I'll move that item.
Second.
Any comments on that item? Seeing none, we're ready for the vote.
The vote is open.
And while we will vote, I will mention we're disappointed that Mr. Croner was unable to attend this evening, but he did submit his written report, and you can find that in the agenda.
The vote is closed and passes unanimously.
Thank you. Ms. Hardy, the curriculum report.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. This evening, there are 4 items for board consideration and 1 item for information only in the curriculum report. Board action items include the approval of dates for next year's Camp Conakry program and honoraria changes, a Camp Conakry honoraria, the approval of course changes to the 2025 to 2026 program of studies, and the approval of a student expulsion agreement. And I so move.
Second.
Any questions or comments on these items? Seeing none, we are ready for the vote. And while we vote, Ms. Hardy, can you discuss your information only item?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mrs. Warner. The information only item includes the details on 4 student teacher requests. I wanted to also let the board know that the Camp Conakry dates next year will be in mid-September to mid-October, and if approved, the honoraria for staff and district nurses to accompany students to spend the night at camp will increase by $25 to $200 per teacher and $250 per nurse in an effort to better entice staff to spend a night away from their own homes and families. The approval of the changes to the program of studies for next school year, as detailed in the document in the agenda, the majority of these course changes are in response to the work done by the math and physical education departments during their curriculum reviews last school year. There are 2 creative writing courses that are being combined and 2 acting courses that are being combined to encourage greater enrollment. And there's also a name change for a tech ed course. Thank you, Mrs. Warner.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy. I apologize for not recognizing that look meant you had comments.
I am still waiting on a vote from Mrs. Blackburn and Ms. Hardy.
Aye.
Thank you very much. The voting is closed and everything passes unanimously.
Mr. Weniger, the finance report.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. There are 2 items for board action this evening. They are the student expenditures for October of 24 and the accounts payable list, and I so move.
Second.
Mr. Weniger, any comments on your items?
No.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we're ready for the vote. And if you could introduce your information only item.
So while we are voting, there are 2 information only items this evening. They are the ending cash balances for November 30th, 2024, and the budget forecast. My thing just changed. My budget forecast for November 24, and I think the highlight of the budget forecast is, let me see if I can navigate through here. Looking like the budget forecast has improved. If Mr. Hauser, if my memory is correct, it looks like it's gotten better. If you provide a little bit of detail, it'd be great.
Yep, just a little bit better from the prior months. We're starting to get a little bit deeper into the school year, so we're able to look at all the categories a little bit more holistically and start to make some of those assessments. And you'll see it start to move a little bit more as the year goes along as well. But still trending right around that $1 million surplus that was right in line with our budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Hauser, when does the blotter come out in January? Do you know the specific date?
I don't know the specific date,
Okay.
But it is going to be in January. And actually, the county just reached out to me last week to confirm my email address, that I was the correct email address to receive it. But I'm not sure of the specific date on the growth.
Okay. Because that will be like Christmas for us if it goes up.
I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see where it heads.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Britton Dozier, the Human Resources Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. We have 7 voting items in the HR folder this evening. The items include resignations and retirement, appointments, wage status changes, leaves of absence, professional contracts, honoraria, and club activities, and supplemental contracts.
Would you like to move those items?
And I so move.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the human resources report?
Just a comment that I like to make every month is thank you to the current employees and those who are leaving our district for their work and efforts on behalf of our students and community.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we're ready for the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed and passes unanimously.
The property and supply reports. Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. There's one item for consideration this evening, and it is the Hop, Skip, and Drive Services Agreement. And I so move that item.
I'll second.
Any comments or questions on this item? Mr. McClure?
Yeah, this is a unique one. It was just introduced to us recently. And I may ask for some clarification for some expanded descriptions, but basically this is a program that will be used occasionally, but it's basically, if I had to summarize it, it's Uber for students. And the kids will, this service will be used for the unique situations where we need to get a kid to a school that maybe we don't send a bus to. I did ask some questions with regard to getting to know a little bit about how these drivers are vetted and their vehicles, how they're inspected, how they're maintained, cleanliness, that kind of thing. So I'm going to toss that over to.
Okay, thank you. The company is relatively new to this area. They're currently in 13 states and serves about 600 schools. Your comment about Uber is about as accurate as you can get for it. It's where individuals use their own vehicle to provide transportation for students. The difference is you don't have a different Uber driver every time you have a ride. You have the same driver. Those drivers are vetted. They have 15 criteria that they use to vet their drivers. Some of them simply the clearances and things of that nature that you need to work with kids. They also have other criteria like you have to have been a caregiver for at least 5 years. That could be a nanny, a teacher, even a parent. Their vehicles, they have to provide proof of insurance, registration, inspection, all of those things. And their vehicle cannot be more than 10 years old. The vehicle also has to be between 4 and 7 passenger. And I know there's a few districts around this area that have started using them. And I plan on using them for unique situations where we may have a homeless student that we just cannot provide transportation for. We do have a couple of schools that only have 1 or 2 students that we're paying a contractor their full rate to transport these few students, and we may be able to realize a cost savings here. It's not a company that we have to set up a contract with for the entire school year. It's only going to be on an as-needed basis. So if we would have a homeless situation and then that student is no longer deemed homeless, we're not obligated to continue using them for that service. I think it could be a good option for us.
I have no other comments, so.
Anyone else? No, I was curious when I saw this in here and I looked at their website and I was pleased with what I saw and just the fact that they had McKinney-Vento on there. So it just really showed me that they are catering specifically to school students and that they require a code word and all those. So I was pleased with what I saw, and I'm glad you're looking at these different types of options, and I'm looking forward to see what kind of opportunities develop for us with this agreement. So we're ready for the vote now.
The vote is open. The vote is closed and passes unanimously.
Thank you. Dr. Gibbs, the Student Services Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. There are 4 items for board action in the Student Services Report. There's a memorandum of understanding with TransPerfect AI portal translation, a memorandum of understanding with TransPerfect telephone interpretation services, Epic special education staffing confirmation, and independent educational evaluation. And I so move.
Second.
Dr. Gibbs, any comments on these items?
No.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we are ready for the vote.
There's
Vote is
one-
open.
There is one information-only item. There is a student at Duquesne that has requested a student teaching experience and will be placed at Marshall Middle School.
Vote is closed, passes unanimously.
Excellent. The Technology Services Report, Dr. Simkowiak.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. There's one item in the Technology Services Report. That is the adoption of the Canvas Learning Management System. And I so move.
Second.
Any comments?
I just wanted to comment that this learning management system was selected after a methodical, holistic, and transparent process in which multiple stakeholder groups were engaged.
I agree. Any other comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we're ready for the vote.
The vote is open. The vote has closed and passes unanimously.
Superintendent's Report, Dr. Highland.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. We have 6 items for board consideration. They are as follows. Second read of Policy 100, Policy 101, Policy 102, Policy 105, Policy 107, and the Professional Seminars Professional Report. We have one informational item, which would be a first read, another first read of Policy 005.
Would someone like to move items 1 to 6?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I just have a comment just to say thank you to the board for working so diligently on trying to get some of these policies through. I think we're making some very good progress. So I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you're putting in behind the scenes.
We appreciate the work the administration has done putting them together and answering our questions. And I think we're also appreciative that there weren't new ones in December. So we'll look forward to January.
The vote opened and closed and passes unanimously.
That concludes our voting items, so we will move on to our special reports. The solicitor's report has been submitted electronically?
No,
or-
it has
oh,
not.
Oh,
We will be
Will-
submitting that electronically for the January meeting in such a short time from the last report to this report. We will wait till January. It'll be more comprehensive at that time.
completely understand. Okay, we will move on to the Citizens Advisory Committee report and the North Allegheny Foundation report. Dr. Simkowiak.
I do not have anything new to report on either one of these.
Excellent. Okay, so now we move on to the A.W. Beatty Career Center report and the legislative report with Mrs. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mrs. Warner. For the A.W. Beatty Career Center, we've been looking at the budget, and North Allegheny will have the most students attending. The great part of that is they're all learning a lot of different trades. The bad part is that gives us a higher percentage of what is owed. But we are looking at the budget and everything looks great there. For the legislative report, they're still looking at cell phone usage, and it is suspected that each state will be asked to put something in place in their facilities as far as cell phone usage. And that is expected even with the new people taking office at the federal level. So we'll see what happens there. But I think a lot of things will be divvied out where the states have power. the other thing that happened is the education secretary has stepped down without giving reason. They have resigned. So we currently have an acting education secretary, and we will see who is selected and what happens from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Blackburn. So now we move on to speakers on non-voting items. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on a voting item? Seeing none.
Mr. Smith has something to say.
Closing items. Does anyone have any announcements or reminders? Seeing none, I adjourn this meeting.